Hello and welcome to Mid-Table Crisis, sponsored by Toucan Industries, with me, Tom Patrick.
And me, Simon Cross. Now, Tom, the World Cup's been chugging along at its merry little pace. I mean, when we last spoke to our listeners around the world, we were getting to the tail end of the group stages. And quite a lot's happened since then, really, hasn't it? We've had the second round, we've had some of the quarterfinals already. We're coming to you today on the 5th of July. So we've got a lot to catch up on, guys, haven't we, really? So best delve straight into it. So, what's your World Cup flashpoint? What do you really want to get your teeth into today, Tom?
I'm quite annoyed about... okay, obviously England are out, and what happens every 4 years is England go out, then people look for somebody else to blame. And it's the same reasons we were hearing 4 years ago, and 4 years before that, and 4 years before that. I think we've all just got to admit that, yeah, we're not that good. Yeah, we're not going to win the World Cup every year. We should stop taking so much pressure on ourselves. Maybe, what I think is a combination of factors. It's not just, people don't put in enough effort at grassroots. We don't teach the kids to play technical football. We don't do this, we don't do that. It's a little bit of everything, and it's not going to get solved straight away. So don't go to every World Cup expecting to win it, okay? Let's all just calm down and think about it, and stop making shit World Cup adverts, please, please, please. I'm not saying that directly to you, Simon, because I know you've had very little to do with those. But, that's my 2 pence worth.
Well, you raised a lot of good points there. I mean, obviously, compared to previous World Cups, I think we went in with lower expectations. I think our group draw helped a lot. The fact that 2010's infamous 4-1 spanking by Germany really brought it home to us. We were falling a little bit in terms of status, but I don't know, to just have such a flat, empty end to our campaign just shows that change has to be made, but it's change that will be done in the long term. There's no short-term solution, as you say, to what we need to do. We need to, at the grassroots level, I believe we are right there. We do need to change the soil, but that's going to take time. That's going to have to feed through. That's another decade you're looking at.
I was going to say that's a 10-year job at least.
Yeah.
You're looking at a different way of training the teenagers. The 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds in academy, in academy teams, changing the way that works. I mean, a lot of people have said, for example, it's a bit of a cliche, but people, if you try and play it out of defence and you're 14, 15, someone will ball at you and you might lose the ball. Whereas in Spain, there's less of a, if you're in defence in a bit of trouble, hump it away, try and play your way out of it, which obviously leads to a more technical style of play. Maybe we do need to take a few more risks, because at the moment our sort of old-fashioned lump it up and get rid, it doesn't seem to be working that well. I mean, that's just one aspect of it, obviously, but I think in general we need to take a few more risks.
I was going to say, well, you've played a lot more under 16s, under 14s grassroots football than I did. I never really played football around that age. So you were part of a team. You had that team mentality when you were growing up. Would you say that football was too direct at that point now, looking back?
Yeah, obviously you've got to look at it from a point of view as that you don't want to be giving away silly goals all the time. But especially as a young footballer growing up in England, it's very much, very few risks. Whack it out if you can't whack it up. Especially if you're playing at the back like I was. And maybe we should be thinking about being a little bit less harsh on players who will try something. Maybe it doesn't always come off. Obviously, don't do something stupid. Don't try and set up a little passing triangle inside your own box. But, Jamie Carragher's gone. The players of old who used to like to steam it into Rosie aren't there anymore. Maybe we should use some different players as our role models. Maybe defenders who play the ball a little bit more. Because I mean, if you look at, for example, some of Brazil's defenders, or some of Chile's defenders, they are more likely to pass the ball around a little bit rather than just hump it up the front. There've been far too many long balls in England's campaign, and obviously it didn't work out very well.
Yeah. I mean,
Mix
we're
it
not
up a little
saying
bit.
cut long balls out completely, because we saw
Right.
in one of the Holland games recently that their diagonals from their fullbacks to the wingers to Robin to RVP when he was drifting a little bit, those were sublime. So there is a place for the long ball. It's just not the only weapon you should have in your locker.
Yeah, definitely. And just defenders that are more comfortable with the ball at their feet. Someone who doesn't look like they want to get the ball away from them as quickly as possible. I'm not saying every defender needs to be Franz Beckenbauer, but just a little bit less rash, a little bit less hurried. Calm it down a little bit.
If you act calm, you'll create time, because I'm not to get all like deep and philosophical here. Time is relative. If you panic, things will be more hurried because you're thinking things will be more hurried. But if you try and keep control of the situation and you've got the mentality to do it, you'll create time and space.
Yeah, I mean, I was brought up last night. I was watching the Brazil game, Brazil-Colombia, which was a great game.
Great game.
Brazil were 2-0 up with 20 minutes to go, and Marcelo just blasted the ball out of defence to no one. He just basically hammered it about 45 yards out for a throw-in, and from that, obviously Colombia got possession back, and they ended up getting a penalty from which they scored. It was bizarre. You would expect it at a Sunday League game. I mean, 2-0 up with 70 minutes to go. He had a bit of space to run into, but they had 10 men back, so he just decided to hit it as hard as he could. It was like a school game.
I think that's a sign, an endemic sign, something we'll touch on a little bit more, I think, that the pressure's starting to get to Brazil, I think, a little bit. I think if they hadn't had that early goal against Colombia, you'd have seen a very, very different game last night. Because, you're right, Brazilian defenders, when they're 2-0 up with 20 minutes to go, wouldn't normally do that. It's a sign that, because they've never won at host, they've never really got over 1950. This is, 64 years later, this is their chance to put it to rest. And now it's starting to weigh on the players, and especially now they've lost Neymar for the rest of the World Cup.
Yeah, it wasn't a great challenge. I don't know really what he was trying to do. I don't think he was trying to put him out of the game.
It wasn't malicious, but it was bloody clumsy, you're right. I mean, it's sad for me, because obviously they were my dark horses. I've been harping about them since the start. And they didn't shame themselves last night. They played very well. And
they gave a brilliant account of themselves over the whole World Cup, definitely.
Yeah. They've definitely had the player of the tournament. I think he's 2 goals ahead in the Golden Boot. And there's not many games left to go for some teams. I mean, Germany have 3, so Muller's got a chance.
Yeah.
I mean, well, Germany have 3 if they go through.
Germany are in the semis.
Oh, Germany are... No, they are already in the semis, yes. I'm getting my days
so
mixed up.
they've definitely got 2 games left, because they've got
they've got either the third place or the final.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Muller's got 2 games, so he's only 2 goals behind. Messi's sat on the same level as Muller, so I mean, Rodriguez hasn't guaranteed himself the Golden Boot, but he's bloody close.
Yeah, I mean, I think he played 6 games and he got 6 goals. So, was it 5 in 6? I'm not sure, but I think he definitely scored in every single game. Oh yeah, it was 6 in 5. So what you got to say about that is he couldn't have done any more, really, could he?
No.
And against Brazil, he was getting kicked about all over the place.
I am amazed they finished with 11 men. Absolutely amazed.
Oh, that's the thing as well. The next Brazil game is going to be very interesting. No Thiago Silva, he's ruled himself out with that yellow card. No Neymar.
And they're against the Germans.
And the Germans, they like to, they'll punish any weaknesses.
They'll do the job.
They're that team. Thiago Silva,
They're that team that will just get the job done no matter what. They'll find a way. Typical Germany, just no matter what circumstances they're in, they'll just find a way to succeed.
Typical German efficiency.
Exactly. And let's face it, and most people are expecting them to, Argentina and Holland win their games today. The other semi-final is going to be Argentina-Holland, so whoever gets through still got a tough test.
Yeah, it's not going to be easy getting to that. When you get to these games as well, you're never going to come up against a weak side.
No.
I mean, people may say Costa Rica are the weakest side left in it, but I mean, they've surprised so many people. The Dutch can't underestimate them.
No.
They might well do, but they really shouldn't. They really shouldn't.
No, as I say, I mean, it's going to be one of those. It's going to be one of those games where you'll either see the Dutch just come out the block steaming, or it's going to be a tight, nervy affair that a tense 1-0 either way.
Mm. Costa Rica very impressive against England, against Uruguay especially, and against Italy. I mean, you can't really argue that they didn't deserve to go through. They were the best team in that group. Uruguay were lucky to squeak through, to be honest. But speaking of Uruguay, we do have to mention Suarez's bite. Now, of course, this happened in the Italy game, the final World Cup game. And Simon, I know you must have an opinion on this, so hit me with it.
It's just, why in front of the world's cameras will you do something that stupid? I get it, you're behind. Well, you're not even behind, you're winning the game. And you're already winning the game, you've got 10 minutes to go, there's no need to do that in any circumstance, let alone if you've got previous and you want to try and prove that you've changed your ways. I mean, this is his third incident now, and it's just absolutely, it baffles me that he thought he could get away with it, B, that he denied it, and C, that he even did it in the first place. It's just, it's beyond comprehension why he would act like that.
Yeah, I mean, doing it the first time was bad enough. Then doing it again in England, and since then people have been talking about what a good attitude he's got, how he's changed so much since the Branislav Ivanovic bite, and then he bites someone at the World Cup in a crucial game that they had to win basically to get through.
Yeah,
utterly unbelievable. And he was probably their best player as well, so they were really going to struggle without him. And almost scuppered his transfer. Of course, now it looks like he's going to Barcelona for about 63 million, but I'd say Liverpool might have been able to get about 10 or 15 million more. And there has been, Suarez has come out and apologised now, but there have been quite a few reports saying that Barcelona insisted that he apologise before they signed him.
Well, look, without meaning to sound a bit too, dismissive, but Liverpool, I think now should just cut their losses. I think they realised he's not worth the hassle. Let someone else deal with him. We'll take the cash, thank you very much, and we'll shore up our back line. I mean,
63 million's a lot of money. You can get some good players for that, and of course he's going to be banned for the start of the season anyway. So
exactly,
it's not as much. It's not as big as loss as some people might suggest.
His loss is Ricky Lambert's gain, if you think about it.
I mean, obviously they're not like for like, and they'll probably look to bring in another big striker.
Yeah.
But they'll
still though.
Liverpool have done okay out of it. I mean, £63 million for a player who's very divisive and who would miss a few months of the season anyway, and who is, they wouldn't get that amount of money for him next year. What is he, 27, 28? So
yeah,
obviously he's near his prime now. But, it's not going to be too long before he's on the decline. He's
damaged goods, ultimately, in terms of a player you can rely on to be there all the time because of his actions. Let's not forget, it's not just biting. There's the whole racism storm. Liverpool stuck behind him by that when they did things they probably shouldn't have done in hindsight. Their PR department must have had a bit of a dodgy one there. But
yeah, I really think if it weren't for, if it was a lesser player, someone who wasn't as important to the team, they wouldn't have stuck by him so much. They sort of sold out a little bit, I might suggest.
Well, to quote George Orwell, all animals are equal, but some are more equal than others.
All right. I kind of see what you mean. It was a bit like, it made me laugh about Uruguay. Uruguay kept saying that there was some sort of conspiracy against them. Tabarez had a go at a journalist saying that he was victimising Suarez. Uruguay playing the victim. If an Italian player had bitten a Uruguayan player, can you just imagine what they would have done?
God. The man had his head on a platter or damn near close to it.
It would have been ridiculous. I mean, the Uruguayans would have been going mental. But when one of their lads does it, it's not. And Suarez's original comments about it were ridiculous. He was like, "Oh yeah, it happens in games. I I fell onto him with my mouth. It was like, it's a bit like Ricky Gervais's stories about, where people used to go into the A&E with bottles of ketchup stuffed up their arse, and they'd be like, "Oh, I fell over and bottle fell into it, and
Yeah,
I can't
foul.
get it
Just
out."
foul. Exactly. All that Little Britain character that you always see doing press statements outside the gates of his, like, mansion with his repressed wife and children.
Yeah,
Upon entering the building, my clothes fell off. That kind of just really.
yeah. The Tory MP who's been found out as a dogger
That's the
or
one.
a cottager.
One of their better characters, I must say.
Yeah, I mean, not that often seen and not overused, which is good.
Which is what you
A
want.
bit like your cock. Are you interested to see whether that one makes it in?
That's what she said.
All right then.
So, back to the football listeners. So, we've talked a lot about Colombia, and we've talked a lot about certain players like Suarez. I mean, before his antics, he was doing well in the tournament, got a lot of, praise and accolade, especially against England. Who would you say is your tournament standout? I mean, I know who mine is, and I think we're agreed on this one, but let's get it out of the way early doors. James Rodriguez. Yeah, what a guy.
Yeah. I mean, he's 22. In fact, he's 23 this time next week. So happy birthday! I think technically it's pronounced Hannes or something like that.
I think
we'll
it's
call
Hannes,
him James for the sake of our. I think we'll call him James for the sake of our English listeners. And he has really been a breath of fresh air. I mean, obviously, it's been a little bit annoying, to be honest. That, I mean, obviously you and me knew he existed before, and some football fans maybe don't follow football quite as much, or outside the UK don't really know him that well, which is fair enough. But some of the football journalists are coming out a bit like he's never played before. It's a bit like when Aguero signed for Man City. People are like, "Oh my God, he's came out of nowhere and he's brilliant." No, he's playing for Atletico Madrid for ages and playing really well. Jackson Martinez is a good player as well. It's just like people are like, Colombia, this team no one's ever heard of before, and their star player who no one's ever heard of before. Colombia have been a good team for a while, and James Rodriguez plays for Monaco, one of the biggest clubs in France, and are going to be a force in Europe. It's not like how much did they pay for him? Like 45 million euros, something like that. It's not like he's under the radar.
Yeah. Well, they did the thing with him and Jan Montinho, where I think with Jan Montinho, a lot of his money was going to go to Sporting Lisbon. So they said, we'll give you the 25%. Fixed price for both. So they paid $1 million for Jan Montinho and put all the extra money into James Rodriguez's transfer fee, which is it's not immoral, but it's fiendishly clever. And if you're Sporting Lisbon, you're just there like, come on.
Hey, well, I think it was immoral. Yeah, Porto. There was a clause in the contract that said that when Porto signed him, that I think Lisbon would get. I think it was about 25% of the profit.
Yeah.
And they bought him for about 8 million euros. So he was probably worth about 20 million euros. So they saved themselves a lot of money there. Yeah, it was a bit of a fiddle.
It's that age-old thing. I mean, they didn't technically do anything wrong. It's their prerogative to sell a player for whatever they think he's worth, but they seem to find their money elsewhere, if you follow me. So, yeah, there's a case for both sides. I mean, I think we're slightly... I'm going to play devil's advocate. They didn't break any rules. It was set out clearly. They just capitalised on a situation. Harm done to Sporting Lisbon, but ultimately, Porto haven't done anything wrong in the rule book.
No. A little bit dodgy, but I understand where you're coming from. And just a quick word on João Moutinho as well. I was very annoyed, obviously Portugal are out, but I was very annoyed that people kept saying Portugal are a one-man team. Yeah, Ronaldo is a very good player, but they do have some other good players as well. Moutinho, for example, is the most obvious one, but I like Raul Morelos as well. And I don't like Pepe and Bruno Alves, but they are half decent defenders. It's not like it was
when they're not
acting
like complete idiots in Pepe's case.
Yeah, I was going to say that's the problem with Bruno Alves and Pepe. They're good defenders when they aren't headbutting people and knocking people about. I mean, most people, maybe you don't know Bruno Alves quite as well as Pepe, because obviously Pepe plays for Real Madrid. Bruno Alves is a fairly violent man, but also a very good centre-back when he's actually, on the pitch and not being banned.
When they let him out, basically.
Yeah, bless him.
So yeah, I mean, back to your point on Raul Morales and players coming out of nowhere. It sort of works the other way, because Raul Morales dropped off the radar when he left the UK, and I was like, oh, what's he been up to lately? He's doing well. He's rehabbed his career. Another one that rehabbed his career, and everyone was surprised about him at 2010. Diego Forlan. It's like, oh, Diego Forlan's still this good? Diego Forlan was always that good. He just never gelled at United. It's not his fault.
A lot of South American players struggle in the pace of the English game. For example,
Varane.
Yeah, Varane. A lot of people don't remember about Varane. He actually won a Premier League Player of the Month in his first month. I think the problem with Varane was that he had not one but two big transfers to Manchester United and then to Chelsea, and he started off okay, and then he really did struggle. But that doesn't mean he's a bad player. Same with Forlan. He struggled. Doesn't mean he's a bad player. Cleverson won the World Cup. Yeah, he didn't do well at United, but not necessarily a bad player. Just because they had maybe one, maybe two seasons in the Premier League and they didn't perform, that's got nothing to do with like the rest of their career in context.
I had a conversation once with a dear friend of mine when Edin Dzeko had signed for Man City his first year, and he was like, "Well, why have they paid all this money for him? He's awful. He's slow. He's not doing it." I'm like, "Mate, give him another season, you'll see." And I was right. Like, players, people don't realise sometimes, and this was brought up in Soccernomics as well, that players do take time to gel. They need to, get accustomed to not just the football pitch, but life outside. I mean, if you move to, Germany tomorrow for work, your performances are going to be down because, socially you're going to suffer. You don't know the language. You can't figure out, where the best places to eat are. You haven't found it, for example, if you had kids, I know you don't, but you haven't found a school for your kids, you don't know if they're going to settle. Footballers, have to move their families around as well. There's a lot to think about.
Yeah, exactly. And you think of someone like a seasoned traveller like Robbie Keane. He's had a lot of clubs. When he moved to Liverpool, he struggled and he eventually went back. And that was from London to Liverpool. And that's someone who speaks the language, who's lived in the country for a long time, who knows the kind of football they're going to be playing. All right, multiply that by 10 if they don't speak the language. They come from a different country, sometimes a different continent. It's a completely different style of football. You can't really expect someone to, especially the thing with South America, of course, it's a lot hotter over there. They tend to be more technical and less based on the physical side of the game. So of course the South Americans are going to struggle a little bit. I mean, even players like Didier Drogba's a Chelsea legend now. He was pretty awful for about the first season and a half. He was really struggling. So you can't really judge someone on a single season.
No. I mean, of course, we're going to see a lot of players move now. That's why we're talking about the difficulties of the transfer market. That's why it all links in. I mean, we've talked about James Rodriguez. There's rumours that Manchester United are trying to throw as much money as possible at him to get him to move. There's a few other star names at the moment that, well, say star names we didn't know before, but they're in line for big moves. I mean, a couple of goalkeepers, Ochoa, the Mexican juggernaut that he is. He's a free agent, for God's sake. So,
yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if we spoke about this last time, but yeah, after that performance against Brazil, his agent's phone must just have turned it off because he's just sick of it. I mean, the fax machine in his office is
just melted.
Yeah. I mean, literally every single team, even if they've got maybe a third choice vacancy, are just like, oh, God, come on, we'll give you some money for him. I mean,
he'd be a good fit at Arsenal, I think.
Apparently they are interested, but I think every single club in the world, from Nuneaton Town and above, have been mentioned saying they're interested in him. So
to be fair, if they do miss out on him, they've got the bargain of Keylor Navas to look at as well. I mean, his release clause is €10 million, so £8 million. He's only on 5k a week, so I don't think he'd ask for too much. Costa Rican keeper would be, a decent someone else if you couldn't get Ochoa.
He's 27 as well, which is
a goalkeeper.
A good age for a keeper because he's got good amount of experience, but he could easily go on for another 10 years or more.
Yeah.
So it's a really good buy, I'd say. I mean, he's at Levante at the moment. Atletico Madrid are sniffing around, but especially after how good a World Cup he's had, other people are going to be interested.
This has been a goalkeepers World Cup, if you think about it as well, because Navas, Ochoa, but we have to say it, Tim Howard, like the legend that he is. I mean, some people are like talking about how he can play for another 5-10 years for Everton. I mean, I'm surprised no one's even tried to entertain the idea of a move yet for Tim Howard. I mean, I know he's pretty settled, but
he's always been a good player. Obviously, I'm not exactly sure if he was a Man United player, because at Man United it's not just about being a footballer. It's about how you deal with all the pressure and the stress. And a lot of people can't deal with it. And I think, especially after Schmeichel left, because there was no one ever that really replaced him until Van der Sar. I think there was a lot of pressure to fill his boots. Whereas at Everton, he's very solid. He's usually got a good defence in front of him, and you know you're going to get a good performance out of him. Same at the USA. Obviously, we've all seen the memes going around.
Have you seen that someone changed the Wikipedia page for the Secretary of Defence for the USA and named it as Tim Howard?
Yeah, I did. Oh, that made me smile. It's good to see the Americans getting so involved in the World Cup as well. I know that Clinton really got them fired up, and this was probably the World Cup they've been most interested in since 1994.
When they hosted.
Yeah, so well done to them, and welcome to the party, although they've just left it. It'll be good to see them again in the next one, because they usually qualify.
Well, and they'll be in Russia too, so they'll have a personal interest there as well.
Yeah.
Oh God, could you imagine if the Americans knocked out the Russians in their own backyard? It'd be like a miracle on Ice Mark 2.
Yeah. And I've got to quickly say as well, it was interesting seeing how bad Russia were. Capello obviously I still believe is a very good manager. Perhaps not best for international management.
He's a league manager, he's not a tournament manager.
I mean, yeah, a great manager at AC Milan. Did some good things at Italy with teams like Roma. But you've got to think, after the debacle that was the England World Cup campaign last time, is he really right for World Cup management? I think Russia was maybe a better fit to him, because I think Russians in general do like an iron fist. They believe they need to be controlled, which is a relic from the past. So maybe that was a better fit for Capello and for Russia. But they still were pretty uninspiring. I mean, they went out and they never really looked like, even if they did get through, they were going to pull up any trees, did they?
No, I mean, the reason I say he's more of a league manager than a tournament manager is, in league football, if you don't lose games and just get the odd goal, more often than not, you'll finish very high up in the league anyway. In tournament football, you can, get the cheeky little 1-0s, but you're not in full control of your own destiny if you only get the 1-0s. You're planning to grind to draw. You need to go out on the offensive a bit more from the start. I think that's one of England's problems.
You also need to throw a little bit of trust behind the flair players that might be able to turn a game with a moment's brilliance, because it's not like in the league where if you play him every week, then he'll be up and down. You sometimes need someone to just make that difference, because if you don't win one of your group games, if the difference between a draw and a loss in a group game is massive, as is the difference between a draw and a win. So, the difference between a 2-1 and a 1-1, absolutely huge.
Exactly. I mean, look at Lionel Messi when he dug Argentina out that hole against Iran in the last minute.
Yeah.
You need people like that sometimes. Just make the big plays. The Hail Mary.
Russia haven't got a Messi, but they have got players who can do some damage, that maybe should have been given more time and maybe a bigger shout. It was. The World Cup's not been very nice to Capello in general, as a player and as a manager. So maybe it's time that he started thinking about his future there. I mean, he is 68, so he's not going to be around too much longer anyway. But,
no, I think this would be it, really. I wouldn't do too much, else. Now, just having a look at Just having a look at, the transfer going ins and outs. I mean, obviously we're talking about a lot of speculation at the moment. We do have a couple more, big definites. Diego Costa, he's officially signed. He's officially a Chelsea player. I mean, will he be another great striker in the mold? Well, not in the mold of Drogba, but will he get the legend of Drogba, or will he get the millstone of Torres? What kind of acquisition do you reckon he'll be?
I think he'll try and create one for himself, obviously, but I'd say I'm not sure how much expectation he arrives with, because if he'd had a really good World Cup, then yeah, he would have been, people would have been talking about him as their saviour, because obviously their striking options have been very poor, especially at the end of last season when it was just Torres, Bar, and Eto. Yeah, as their sort of recognised centre forwards.
About 3 years ago, that'd be a dream team, but
yeah,
and Denver Bar.
Yeah, poor old Denver, not a bad player, bless him. But yeah, I think because Costa's had such a poor World Cup. I mean, Spain were obviously fairly poor in general, but Costa didn't really get a sniff. I'm not quite sure what the expectations are going to be. I think what they need is basically just a solid 20, 25 goals a season striker, which is what every team needs really. But I mean, Chelsea especially, just because they didn't have that spearhead really. They relied so much on players like Oscar and Hazard, the midfielders, their attacking midfielders to score the goals. Whereas, all great teams really need a good goal scorer up front.
Exactly.
So maybe if he can fulfill that role, he'll be doing very well.
I mean, just look at what RVP did for United when he signed. Basically won them the league off his own back due to the goals he scored.
Yeah, and he would have, it would have been the same at Arsenal if he'd had a bit more support. He was the one that finished them all off, but unfortunately they lacked a bit of defensive strength. Because that's the thing. Chelsea have got the defensive strength and they've got a good midfield, but they just haven't got the attack.
Yeah.
And obviously this is part, another piece in the jigsaw.
But we've also got some others. I mean, we've got the official move of Adam Lallana to Liverpool. That's 25 million they've spent on him. They've also spent 10 million on Emre Can from Bayer Leverkusen, so they've splashed the cash. Liverpool.
Yeah, of course they've also got Lambert as well. You do feel sorry for Southampton, to be honest, because their manager's been plundered, and 3 of their best players now that Luke Shaw's gone. Obviously, they've got a lot of money to spend, but you've really got to be worrying about them because there's a lack of quality there now. The heart's been ripped out of that team.
They'll be okay. I think they've got a plan. I hope they've got a plan because they're a great side.
Is it Koeman in charge?
Is it who in charge at the moment?
Koeman. Ronald.
Ronald. I believe he's taking the job. I don't know if he's been officially announced. I think he might have been.
Yeah, I think he's brought his brother Owen in as well as his assistant, which is nice. And I didn't realise this. I saw someone on Facebook the other day. Ronald Koeman, when he was manager of Feyenoord, this was probably a couple of months ago, to be honest. He'd made some comments on I think it was a Dutch player, and somebody had said, "Oh, who cares what you think? Your manager of your manager of Feyenoord," and that really annoyed me because I thought Ronald Koeman, the former Barcelona defender, the former Dutch legend, free kicks, powerful drives, knocked England out of the qualifications of '94. A great famous player. 78 caps for the Dutch. It really annoyed me that people don't seem to know who he is, because he was a very good player. He was also a very dirty player. But honestly, if you get the time, have a look at his record as a defender, his goal scoring record. 1 in 3 at some of his clubs. For PSV, he scored 51 goals in 98 games, and he mainly played as either a centre back or a defensive midfielder. Yeah, he did occasionally play wide.
Yeah.
But basically, the goal scoring record of him, and the toughness, and he's got such a good record playing at World Cups, 2 World Cups. He won the Euro '88. If you don't know who he is, if you don't know who he is, then you really should. Yeah. I
Exactly.
mean, he was part of the dream team in '94. He was in that famous team that went up against AC Milan in '94 in the European Cup final. He ended up being on the wrong side of a 4-0 in one of the best games ever. So yeah, if you don't know who he is, find out about him and his brother Owen, who's basically Ronnie Koeman light.
Exactly.
So, but one thing I think rant over, by the way. One thing I think he will be doing is bringing in a few Dutch players because obviously he knows the Dutch league very well, and I think he's managed a little bit in Germany as well, or he knows the German league. So what he might well do is bring in some good players from Germany, maybe from Belgium as well, and obviously from Holland. And there'll be cut price players that will be able to do a job in the
To
Premiership.
be fair, he's got a good academy to pick from, so don't be surprised if he just drags one of the youngsters through. I mean, they've still got Ward-Prowse, they've still got Jay Rodriguez. They're not completely depleted. They've got that young right back, whose name escapes me, but he started to break
Daniel
through.
Klein?
Not Klein. No, they've got another one as well. I mean, they've got Klein, but there is another one there that they've dragged through their own academy. I can't remember his name. What is his name?
I wouldn't say them necessarily. He probably wanted to come through, but I do understand what you mean. But I mean, obviously, I think Koeman is a good manager, but my problem is, they've just had the three best players probably ripped out of that team. So it's going to take a while when the new players come in. I just hope that the new players can gel well enough so that they can get off. They can sort of bring it back because if they don't make the right signings, then you've got to worry about them. You really have. They've only been in the Premiership for a season.
Well, a couple of seasons now.
Yeah.
I know what you mean. Just there, like they've been there for a while. They've come back, but they've not. They're not like a mainstay. But then again, a mainstay is quite hard to come by at the moment, isn't it? Really.
Yeah. Was it Callum Chambers, by the way?
That's the one. Yes, I knew it was. I knew it was a C. His surname. I just couldn't think. Name escaped me. So they've got those. I mean, there's a chance still for Southampton. I mean, there are other big deals too. I mean, we've not touched on it yet because you mentioned Barcelona, and that made me think of it. We've got Ivan Rakitic going from Sevilla to Barcelona.
That was a slightly odd one for me. I've been a big fan of his for a while. I wasn't quite sure why he made that move. I mean,
yeah, I think you and I are about to drive home the same point here. It's like, are you going to break into that team? Well,
yeah, I mean,
seen.
I think I think what it heralds is a gradual reshaping of the old guard. I mean, Xavi's 34, Iniesta's 30. They're slowly going to be phased out, but I think Rakitic is probably going to, unless he hits some very good form and gets the chance, he's probably going to be struggling for game time for a season or two. Because if you look at the players they've already got, I mean, they've got Mascherano, who sometimes plays defence. I know they've got Busquets. Obviously, they've got and they've also feel like, for example, Pedro and Sanchez quite often plays either as a wide player and attacking midfielder for them. Xavi and Iniesta, obviously, they've got a lot of midfielders. Fabregas is gone now, I know.
True.
But I think if he's given the chance, he'll do well. I just don't necessarily think he'll be given the chance.
Yeah. I mean, one player that I think will be given the chance is Sim de Jong, who's gone to Newcastle United on a 6-year deal. I mean, they had Luke de Jong, his brother, there, but he didn't do too well. Well, not well at all, really. But they've managed to get in Sim de Jong now. Do you reckon he'll be the striker that they need? I mean, they've not got Remy anymore. He's gone back on loan. Gone back to CPR for now. So.
Yeah, I've been talking to a mutual friend of ours who happens to be a Newcastle fan, and he was very happy with it. I think, I think he'll do well for them. But also, I think Newcastle need bodies to a certain extent because, Remy was their impetus for a lot of the season. I think even Shola Amiobi's left, so now they've not really got too much up front. A bit like Chelsea, really. The striking options were looking fairly depleted, so they really need to get some new players. And De Jong looks like a decent player, to be honest. I mean, the Dutch tend to do quite well in the Premier League, they tend to find the transition not too difficult because the Dutch league, although it's not one of the best, it's not one of the worst either, and they do play a good kind of football with a certain amount of physicality, so it's not too much of an adjustment.
And they speak the language off the bat. Same reason we import a lot of Scandinavians is because they know English already, so that's one obstacle removed.
And just a quick word. This is a slight brilliant World Cup punditry from Seedorf, for example, the lovely Dutchman, and Thierry Henry as well. Again, what wonderful English and what wonderful gentlemen.
That's true. I mean, we've really had some good World Cup pundits. I like Ian Wright. I just love the way he's just so unpolished, and that's what makes him good. You see all these ones who've had media training, they've just thrown Ian Wright into the mixer, and it works.
Yeah, I'd say that sometimes it works and sometimes it really doesn't. For every time that he says something good, and it is good to have him there, there's other times where he doesn't. He's had a good World Cup, to be fair. He hasn't said anything too stupid.
Well,
but there have been times
he has in terms of
punditry.
He's had the thing with his family to deal with as well.
Yeah.
I mean, we wish him all the best with that, and I hope the guys that broke into his house and robbed his family are brought to justice. I mean, we all do. But the fact that he came back, obviously, his family were okay with that, and he came back. Shows how much he loves the game. That's what he is. He's someone. He's a fan that loves the game, and he knows the game. He's a very, very wise man. I mean, not many people listen to 606 on Sunday night, compared to watch the World Cup. So he'll have had exposure to a bigger audience. But on 606, he's very knowledgeable about the game. I rate him as a pundit.
I think he's alright, but I think he has his moments. He's a bit mercurial. I think he's a very good player. He was a very good player. I think he's very passionate as well. He's got the kind of, I think he must get very annoyed at some of the passionless displays by England, because he was always, as an Arsenal player, as a Palace player, even afterwards when he was at West Ham and Forest and Celtic, always wanted to play the game. So I think he's a very passionate person.
But you got to think England-wise, if he didn't get a career, did he get a career befitting his talent? I mean, he was up against a lot of competition. Shearer, Cole, Les Ferdinand, they were great, players.
The end of Lineker's career, really. I mean,
Sheringham, there's another one.
Yeah, Lineker was coming to the end of his career. He was quite a similar player. They're both goal poachers. And yeah, obviously Shearer was usually going to be a shoe-in, so it was going to be who was going to be Shearer's strike partner. Quite often it was Sheringham. So yeah, I think he didn't get more than 40 caps, which, considering the amount of goals he scored, is very harsh.
Yeah.
And I don't think Taylor necessarily trusted him that much. So, well, you've got to just say he was very unlucky, and it must be very hard for him watching players who probably weren't as good as him racking up the caps and really not putting the hearts into it.
Well, I think if we have more players like Ian Wright, playing with their heart, whilst they're wearing the Three Lions, I think that's all the majority of fans actually want out of England, is people who look like they're playing because they want it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very sweet note to end it on. I think, a nice sweet note there. So this has been Mid-Table Crisis. I have been, will continue to be, and will always be Simon Benjamin Cross.
I'm going to be Tom Patrick this week and next week, and probably the week afterwards. Have a lovely day. I hope you enjoyed this podcast.
Have a good one, listeners. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.